I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Delphi murders, a brutal crime in a small town in Indiana involving two young girls, best friends, who had their throats slashed. Prosecutors say it was a local CVS worker who did it, but the defense says it was a ritualistic killing by a group of Odinists. Here's the story. It was a mystery that tortured two families, terrified a small community, and touched the world. The murders of two young girls, Abby Williams and Libby German. The case became known as the Delphi Murders. The setting, a small Indiana town of just under 3,000 people. From the beginning, investigators suspected it was someone local, which made it even more difficult for everyone in this small community. It all happened on February 13th, 2017, when Libby and Abby went hiking. The two teenagers were good friends and had the day off from school. The weather was unseasonably warm, but when Libby and Abby did not show up for their ride home, their families began to worry and they began to search. Then the next day, the bodies of the two girls were found, both victims of murder. Then over the course of the next 5 years, there were no answers, no arrests, just a series of disjointed clues, like two sketches that looked absolutely nothing alike, a video of the suspected killer, and a short audio recording of his voice. Then, finally, an arrest. A local CVS worker named Richard Allen, who told investigators early on that he was there that day. Allen denies all the allegations, and the defense says it was actually a ritualistic killing by a group of Odinists. Richard Allen is now on trial, but many are wondering if the right man has been arrested. So there's different types of evidence in a case. There's circumstantial evidence, pieces of evidence that provide circumstances that point towards a killer, a suspect. Then there's direct evidence, which can be an eyewitness who sees someone commit the actual crime, a videotape of the crime, or a confession is also considered direct evidence. Now, the first time we came across a confession in this case, or information related to a confession, was from a state filing from June of 2023. Let's take a look at it. And it really kind of struck me like, oh, okay, they've got something here. On April 3rd, 2023, Richard Allen made a phone call to his wife, Kathy Allen. In that phone call, Richard Allen admits several times that he killed Abby and Libby. His wife, Kathy Allen, ends the phone call abruptly. First time I read that, I was like, okay, well, they've got a confession. Direct evidence. He's admitting that he did it. Why would he admit he did it if he didn't actually do it? But then comes the rest of the story, and obviously there's much more to this story, and there are actually more alleged confessions. But that brings me to our first question, and it's about the confessions. Are Richard Allen's confessions trustworthy? We know there is such thing as a false confession. I've witnessed it firsthand here at Court TV and one of the big trials that we covered. So with us to discuss this, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald, who is on the ground in Indiana, and false confessions expert who's been in more than 400 cases as a consultant and witness, including the case I was talking about, the case against Skylar Richardson. Alan Hirsch is with us. You can find him at truthaboutfalseconfessions.com. Thank you both for being here. Barbara, let me begin with you. Give us some idea about these plural confessions that we're talking about. Are they detailed? Are they recorded? When are they taking place?
So there are alleged to be 61 of these confessions that all happened months into Richard Allen's solitary confinement in a maximum security prison after his arrest in October of 22. These all happened in the following April, May, and June time period. It was after he had been diagnosed as being psychotic. It was after he received a large box containing hundreds of pages of discovery in the case, and he had already met with his attorneys and had conversations about the case and presumably the facts of the case. And it was during the time that he was being treated by a prison psychologist who has admitted on the stand that she was listening to true crime podcasts and YouTube shows about the case. She was participating in chat groups about the case, and she was sharing some of what she learned from those experiences with Richard Allen while he was behind bars. Most of the confessions that we have heard about so far have been pretty vague. One did contain a little more detail, including the detail that he was scared by a van that had arrived in the area, and that's when he decided to no longer sexually assault these girls, but to kill them and then flee the scene. But we have not heard any of those recordings yet.
The recordings have not been played yet. Okay, so let's take a look at some of this. And Alan, I just want to lay out a few more facts for you, then I want to hear what you have to say about this. This is from a reporter's notebook. Former and current Department of Correction employee witness, the former warden, John Gallipo, testified that he was fired or let go from his position as a warden, but testified that Richard Allen, the defendant, sent him a note in March or April of 2023 saying he killed the girls, but no details there. Also, former and current Department of Correction employee witnesses, 7 of the correctional guards from Westville, suicide companions for Richard Allen, observed and logged everything he said and did. 6 Westville guards said Richard Allen gave generic confessions like, "I killed Abby and Libby." One guard said that Allen said he committed the murders with a box cutter he stole from CVS and tossed it in the trash there. That same guard was fired for lying on his application. One guard from another correctional facility heard Allen say that he killed Abby and Libby. The guard admitted on the stand that his written report was less detailed than what he told investigators. Alan Hirsch, how do we determine whether or not a confession or confessions are trustworthy?
Well, let's start with some really important things you said at the outset. You said, why would someone confess to a crime if he didn't commit it? And the answer is many, many reasons. And that's true of confessions that are like this one, if it's false, voluntary. He didn't confess to guilt in the course of a withering interrogation, but he himself came forward and said, "I did it." And you think, why in the world would someone do that? Well, first, let's just, as an empirical fact, it happens all the time. In notorious crime, particularly notorious crimes, it's very common for people to come forward and claim they did it when they didn't, and for all kinds of reasons. So let's start with that. You said also that confessions are one type of evidence, and that's exactly right. And the biggest contribution I could make to this discussion is if I could help people understand that it is an overvalued type of evidence. What I would want to know in this case, apart from all of the circumstances surrounding the confession, is about the objective evidence, the physical evidence. My understanding is DNA testing does not implicate Mr. Allen. I understand there is other evidence, possibly you alluded to this videotape and the voice of the actual culprit. I would hope there is careful analysis of whether Mr. Allen is the person in that videotape and if it's his voice that we hear. But to take at face value 60 alleged confessions by someone who has a clear mental health history would be a big mistake. And I think Barbara made clear one reason it would be a mistake. The prosecution will no doubt point to accurate details in the confession. We find that in numerous cases of proven false confessions that they had accurate details. And in her account, you can easily understand why. You had someone familiar with the case who was sharing details with him. You also had several interrogations of him by law enforcement. So it's not shocking if he gave accurate details, even if he was no more involved than you or I.
So, Barbara, at this point of where we are in the trial, is there any indication from prosecutors through the way they're questioning and the way information is coming out that he provided details that only the killer would know, things that were held back, and that no one knew? Because that's the traditional way we do it, right? That's why law enforcement always tells us we don't put everything out there, because in high-profile cases like this, we can get people coming forward who didn't commit the crime, right? Was anything held back, or was everything in those boxes of discovery that were provided before these alleged confessions?
The prosecution hasn't put an exclamation point on whatever their point is about the information only the killer would know. Apparently this van, they feel, is information that perhaps only the killer would know, and as well as perhaps his intent to sexually assault the girls, although they were not sexually assaulted. There was no evidence found of that. But regarding the van, this is information I've known for several years. I've talked to locals who say it was well known in the local community that this resident who lived across the creek probably came home around the time that this was going on and could have spooked somebody. It's also a theory that I've heard from law enforcement several years ago. So that very well could have been contained in that discovery. Richard Allen lived and worked in this community. He could have heard it from a number of places.
All right, Alan Hirsch, we're going to bring you back as we get more details from court as they come out each day. I hope you'll come back on. Thank you so much. Coming up next, why was Richard Allen kept in these conditions before trial?
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame on you! Shame on you, Richard! You're going to prison for the rest of your life! Shame on you, Richard Allen!
We are in Georgia for the trial of a wife who's accused of killing her husband and then burning his remains.
When you see the opportunity and the motive, money, sex, new life.
Gary Ferris was a very prominent Atlanta attorney.
It is common knowledge that they had affairs. Defendant murdered and desecrated her own husband.
The Burn Pile Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
The two girls were reported missing on Monday, February 13th. The bodies were discovered about 12:15 on the 14th in the woods just east of town here by volunteers that helped in the search of the children after they were reported missing to the Carroll County Sheriff's Department.
To the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered two little girls? Two children. Only a coward would do such a thing.
There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence to formulate a PC that was submitted to the court, and the judge did find probable cause for arrest of Richard Allen. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
Yeah, there were a couple phases of this story and this investigation. It really began like many people asking, would this case ever be solved? Would anyone ever be arrested for this murder? And then once someone was, a lot of things have happened here that are very unusual and very different than other cases that we've covered through the years. And it begins with the defendant, Richard Allen, and where he's been housed since his arrest. Usually you get arrested for murder, you end up in jail waiting for your trial. But that's not the case here. He was actually placed into a prison, a correctional facility, awaiting trial with people who've been convicted of their crimes, not people before their trials. And then the testimony of the warden of the correctional facility was really interesting. John Gallipo, the former warden, said that Richard Allen was in the suicide watch cell the entire time he was at Westville, 13 months. The cell that Allen was held in is in a unit for offenders who get in trouble. Most are there for just a few days or a few weeks. The warden testified he's never seen anyone held in there that long, 13 months. And he's not convicted. 13 months he was held there, which brings us to our next question, which is why? Why was Richard Allen kept in these conditions in prison for 13 months, awaiting his trial? Again, while you're waiting for your trial, regardless of what the evidence is or will be, you are still presumed innocent. Still with me, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald, and joining me now, criminal defense attorney and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta, is with us. Thank you both. I want to put a few more details into this conversation before I get a take from both of you. Dr. Monica Walla, the prison psychologist, testifying that Richard Allen was kept alone in a small cell. The lights were never turned off. There was video monitoring him constantly. And Richard Allen was in solitary confinement for 13 months. Inmates are meant to be in solitary confinement for a maximum of 30 days. Then I've got more testimony from John Gallipo, the former warden, saying that Allen was allowed to shower 3 times a week, provided 3 sets of clothing, had access to tablets, was allowed recreation time 5 days a week in an indoor room. Allen was quiet for the first month at the prison and began acting erratically. He began washing his face in the toilet, using the bathroom in his cell, tearing up mail, and eating paper. All right. Bob Motta, let me start with you. How unusual is it before a trial for an inmate to be in these conditions?
Very. It doesn't happen. I mean, jail is where pretrial detainees are kept typically. In terms of him being in solitary for 13 months, Vinny, I've never heard of anything like it, ever. It's unthinkable.
Yeah, Barbara McDonald, from the testimony, was there any explanation as to why Richard Allen was kept in these conditions?
Just that there was a safekeeping order right after his arrest. The then sheriff of Carroll County filed a motion with the court asking for this safekeeping order, saying they didn't think they could protect him at the Carroll County jail. And so the judge at the time approved that, sending Richard Allen to the Department of Corrections, and then that judge recused himself. And so Richard Allen at that point had no attorneys. There was no judge on the case until the Supreme Court came in and appointed a special judge, and then she had to appoint public defenders to represent him. So there was a period of weeks there where he had nobody, and he even had mentioned to this prison psychologist he didn't even know who to talk to about his case. She was the only one who was communicating with him on a regular basis.
Okay, I want to take a listen to William Librato, who was at one point for a short while Richard Allen's attorney, here talking about some of this.
Some of the people that live in Delphi were very brazen about their Odinistic beliefs on their Facebook pages and other social media accounts, including the sergeant who was in charge of keeping Mr. Allen safe in Westville. It's real.
All right, Bob, do you have a theory as to why he was kept in these conditions?
Me? Yeah, I have a theory. So we viewed 2 interviews with Rick Allen with law enforcement when they interviewed him on the 13th October, and then on the 26th of October, which is the day that he turned out being arrested. And he held up, and they used the Reed technique on him hardcore. Jerry Holman, the lieutenant, he absolutely went at him as hard as he could. And Alan never cracked. He never wavered. And I think at that point in time, and the last thing that Holman said on the stand was very interesting to me as an attorney. He said, at that point, we thought we had enough for probable cause to arrest him. And you know, Vinny, that probable cause is a far cry from beyond a reasonable doubt, which meant they knew they needed more evidence. And when they knew that they couldn't crack him, down the pike comes Westville Prison. I mean, it was exactly what they needed to do. They needed to do something to get him to break, because ultimately they needed these confessions. They needed them.
Barbara McDonald, how is this playing the connection between the confessions and the conditions, right? The conditions he's being kept in, and when and how these confessions begin to happen?
Even the warden admitted that in his 28-year career in law enforcement, he had never seen anyone subjected to the treatment that Richard Allen was. He did try to say at times that Richard Allen was treated like any other inmate, or even better. But he also said that out of the 3,000 inmates housed at Westville, there are only 4 cells in that entire prison that were like the one that Richard Allen was in, and Richard Allen was in it for 13 months.
Wow. Barbara McDonald, Bob Mata, thank you. All right, more to get to. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the Delphi murders, a case that is so heartbreaking. 2 young girls enjoying a day off from school ended up brutally murdered in the woods. Locals all wondering how this could happen, but then it took 5 years to solve. And some believe this case still has not actually been solved. Here's the story. Teenagers Abby Williams and Libby German were best friends living in the small rural community of Delphi, Indiana. On February 13th, 2017, the girls had a day off from school, so they decided to go on an outdoor adventure. They were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge, and while on that bridge, Libby recorded a man with her phone uttering the words, "Down the hill." Down the hill. It was down the hill where Libby and Abby would be murdered. Prosecutors say the man on the bridge is responsible, and that man is Richard Allen. But Allen and his attorneys say prosecutors have it all wrong. They say Allen is innocent, and it was someone else on the bridge that day who took the lives of these 2 innocent girls. What is the truth, and will Abby and Libby get justice? An important part of all of this in trying to determine what happened and how it happened is the crime scene itself and the 2 victims, these 2 young girls, and what happened to them and what was discovered through the course of the autopsies. Take a look. This is Dr. Roland Kaur, forensic pathologist, testified. He's someone who performed the autopsies, found no signs of sexual assault on either teenager. Abby had a 2-inch laceration across her neck that damaged the left jugular vein. Libby had between 3 and 5 wounds on her neck. Also testified that the girls may have been alive for 5 to 10 minutes after the infliction of their respective wounds. You know, this is incredibly tragic, incredibly sad about what happened to Abby and Libby and what they went through that day. And that brings me to our next question, which is about the 2 victims, the 2 girls. Who was killed first? I think it's an important question because it tells us part of the story of what happened to them and how it happened. But can we answer this question, who was killed first? With me now, retired forensic pathologist Dr. Michelle Dupree and criminal defense attorney, podcaster Bob Motta, who is there in Indiana. I want to go through some of the information that we've gotten relative to the crime scene, in addition to what was found at the autopsy. Major Patrick Cicero, LaPorte County Sheriff's Office, testified that the files were reviewed. The photos were also reviewed for analysis. There was blood on Libby's foot consistent with walking through blood. There was blood on a tree that was consistent with a transfer stain that was left behind from another object touching the tree. Spatter on the tree indicated that Libby was attacked near the tree. There was a large pool of blood by the tree that indicates Libby died leaning against the tree and then was dragged 20 feet to where her body was found. The dilution of blood on Libby's face going towards her right ear was consistent with a tear. Dr. Michelle Dupree, what are your thoughts about what the forensic pathologist testified about and what the Major Cicero found there? And can we start with the tear?
I think that it sounds like he's accurate. I think those are all very valid assumptions. The tear, I'm not surprised. I think that they were both probably alive. I don't know about 10 minutes, but probably for at least 5 minutes. It also sounds like she was killed there near the tree because of the blood spatter and the blood that was pooling there. The transfer stain would certainly support that as well.
Bob Motta, what is the story that you're hearing being told about the scene and what happened to the girls? And does it reveal to you any story about who was killed first?
I think the closest thing that we've heard that may give us some kind of hint as to who may have been killed first was the fact that that they testified that when Abby was killed, that General or Major Cicero believed that she was clothed because there was no blood anywhere on her torso. There was no blood on her hands at all. And he had opined that he thought that she was actually wearing the clothes that she had on, which we all know were Libby's at the time that she was killed, which would somewhat suggest that Libby had been stripped down, and it may have been that she was the first victim, in light of the fact that Abby is then subsequently dressed in Libby's clothes, which were a larger size, which to me means that theoretically they'd be easier to get on. So, but I mean, in terms of really knowing, it's hard to know. And it's just, those are hard days in court. You know, those are really, really tough days in court.
Absolutely. For everyone. For everyone. Yeah. Well, let's talk more about Abby here. As you said, no blood found on Abby's hands or arms means she was likely bound, unconscious, or restrained when the neck injury, this throat being slashed, was inflicted. Abby was found with her arms raised vertically. Her final position is almost like she was boxing. He described Abby's position as very unusual, stating, "I've never seen it. Abby would have died right away. Abby wouldn't have died right away. This would have taken some time." Dr. Dupree, what are your thoughts about the position of the hands? Final position, almost like she was boxing. What does that tell you?
I think that is a very unusual position. I do think that she probably was restrained at some point based on those findings. I think that's very unusual, that position.
Now, some more information. The Major Patrick Cicero also couldn't rule out that Abby's hands being washed. agreed that Abby could have been held down by a person or person when she was cut. In anything you received, does it link Richard Allen to the murders? And Cicero answered no. So, Bob, putting some of the significance on that part of the testimony and the description here, what are your thoughts? Is the defense perhaps saying there was a second person there?
Yeah, I mean, that's always been their theory. They've always had the theory that there was potentially multiple suspects that were there. And Cicero went so far as he basically had to capitulate that with the wounds to Libby's neck, which were anywhere what he estimated between 3 and 5, he said that 2 of the wounds to him appeared to be potentially what they call a double swipe, meaning the killer had cut twice within the same wound, which he would consider to be 5 wounds. And in his estimation, on cross-examination, he was posed with the question, could multiple people have stabbed her? And he had to answer, I can't rule it out. So that's always been the theory of the defense, that this was more than one. I mean, frankly, it was a thought of law enforcement early on in this investigation. So, you know, and there was one interesting thing that wasn't in the notes. Major Cicero had said that he had found very faint, what he described as could be potential ligature marks, kind of like right under Abby's mouth, and then another one that ran parallel right under her neck. So it didn't look like to be a face covering or something that was trying to stifle her mouth from being able to make noise. And he really didn't have an opinion of what it could be. I mean, he said it could have been duct tape, but he didn't see any residue from the tape anywhere on her. So it's really one of those cases where it's a mystery in terms of just kind of what they had to work with at the scene, what may have happened, and we're still trying to put the pieces together, and we're basically getting close to the state's case being done.
Let me ask you, Dr. Dupree, your thoughts about one person versus 2 people to commit these murders of 2 young girls.
Well, definitely, it could have been 2 people. If it was only one person, usually they will take out the strongest person first to sort of get rid of that challenge to them. But 2 people could certainly be 2 people as well. And I've also seen where a person is bound with their own clothing. Maybe the shirt is wrapped around their neck or their chin to hold them down. So it could have been something like that.
Yeah, Bob was, and there was a bandana found in the creek, wasn't there?
There was. Now, they didn't find any kind of DNA that they could match with anybody on that. And frankly, I think that ultimately the lab tech's conclusion was she thought that might not have even been related to the crime, that particular bandana. So that was what she testified to. But yeah, it was found it was in the creek, kind of in the bigger pile of the girl's clothing that was found in the creek. That was found in the same area. But she just thought that the aging of it seemed like it might not be a fit. But I mean, she's having to guess, you know.
All right, big thank you, Dr. Michelle Dupree. Great to see you. Still to come, what do we know about Richard Allen's wife?
A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls?
No man is born evil.
So you chose bad. On the next Interview with a Killer.
You created the plan. I didn't actually shoot her.
You did murder her, though.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? Did it occur to you that you have just gone from troubled teen to teenage murderer? What was the plan?
She needed payback.
Payback with her life? Interview with a Killer. New episode Sunday, 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
To the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you. And you want to know what we know. And one day, you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls? 2 children. Only a coward would do such a thing.
Richard Allen, if you believe he's the killer, was in fact hiding in plain sight. He was working at CVS in town, didn't go anywhere. But it wasn't hiding necessarily. I mean, he did call the tip line and say, hey, I was there. A couple days afterwards, it was investigators who kind of lost track of the leads in this case and then found it going backwards. One of the volunteers did. But there you heard the sheriff also talking about those closest to you. And he's married. He has a wife. He has a child. Richard Allen is, in fact, married. And now I think we have a picture of Richard Allen and his wife, Kathy. There they are. Obviously in much different times. There she is again. So this brings me to my next question, which, you know, this is always a difficult spot for family members, but what do we know about Richard Allen's wife in all of this? You know, Richard Allen wasn't a loner, no, it's a guy with a family. Still with us for more analysis, criminal defense attorney, host of Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta. Bob, is she going to the courtroom? Is she visible through all of this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's sitting in the second row. I happen to sit right next to her, typically, or close to her. Yeah, she's there every day, along with Richard's mother, Jan, and his stepfather, Ken. They've been there every day.
So does she speak to anyone, or does she, you know, publicly, whether a reporter's going to come up to her or a podcaster or someone, or is she kind of keeping to herself?
She's kind of keeping to herself. You know, you have to understand that they lived in this town, and when this happened, you know, she was ostracized and run out of town. I mean, it broke her heart. I mean, her life was shattered as well. I mean, these cases destroy everybody involved. You know, it's the victims' families are destroyed. Kathy is destroyed. You know, and it's like, and she is sitting in the same place as everybody else, kind of hearing the evidence for the first time. You know, the victims' families aren't kept abreast of what the evidence is. They're hearing all of it for the first time. Kathy Allen's hearing it all for the first time. She's always believed in her husband's innocence. She still does. But, you know, she's sitting there and taking it all in as it's coming in. And, you know, I have a great deal of empathy for her, and I find her to be an incredibly kind person. And I feel really, really bad for everybody in that courtroom that had suffered from this brutal crimes. You know, it's brutal. It really is. It's terrible.
Now, during the interrogation of Richard Allen, during the interview, Jerry Holman brings in Kathy, Richard Allen's wife. And apparently Kathy and Richard hug. Richard tells Kathy he is innocent. Kathy leaves the room. The interrogation continues. And that's when Richard Allen loses his temper. You want to bleep with me, but leave my wife out of this. Is she having any interaction in court with Richard Allen or any of the defense attorneys?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, Richard Allen's looking at her all day, all the time. Every opportunity he has, he looks back at her, and, you know, they're making eye contact, and you know, she has discussions with the attorneys pretty frequently. She's on the list. She's going to be called during the the defense's case in chief. That's for certain. She's going to be testifying. I was happy to see that she was allowed, frankly, that all of the family members from both the girls and from Rick Allen's perspective were able to sit in and be a part of the trial and watch it, because they all deserve to be in there to see what's going on with this case. And yeah, she's just been there, you know. She's been going through it all. She's been going through the emotions of it, you know. She gets upset, obviously, many times, depending on what the subject matter is. There's just a lot that's upsetting about this trial.
And was it her suggestion that Richard Allen, her husband, call the tip line? Because he is, a couple of days later, he calls and says, I was there. Like, did he have do we know if he had a discussion with her about being there? Did he say and tell her? Is any of that coming out in court?
Yeah, that all came out. So yeah, he let her know that day that he had been out to the trails and the bridge. There's some, like, it came out during the interview when they brought Kathy in, and what they had done is they had been working Kathy, they being law enforcement, had been working Kathy in the other room. So they had told her, this is what we've got against your husband. So when they brought her into the room, they were using her as a tool, kind of the last-ditch effort to try to get him to confess. And she's, you know, coming in. They're saying that there's a match to the gun, that your bullet, how was it there? I don't understand. And he's like saying, I can't explain something that's impossible. I don't know. And then, you know, she had a portion of that interview where she's saying, well, you told me you were at the trails. I don't know. I don't remember you telling me you went to the bridge. And he's like, I told you I was at the bridge. But if you back it up to what your original question was, yeah, she had that conversation that he was out there that day. So when they put it out there, they wanted everybody that was out there to come forward and give a statement, just to say, hey, this is what we saw. This is what I observed. This is when I was out there. She said, you got to go do it. They went, they called the sheriff's department, or they went. I can't remember if it was they called or they physically went to the sheriff's department. They took his information. He then gets a call from Dan Doolin, who's the DNR officer who ended up taking his statement, and he was already out, like shopping, like he was near this market. The state had tried to portray it as if he had said, no, I don't want you coming to my house. No, you know, I'm not going to come to the police station, but I'll meet you out somewhere. When it came out a little, we got more information during the state's, you know, own case, that he was already out driving about. At least that was his story, and that he had said, look, I'll meet you at this market. I'm right here. So yeah, it's a wild one, Vinny.
It is.
Wish you were here, buddy.
Well, we'll see. Bob Mata, thank you so much. You know, family members of killers and accused killers many times have nothing to do with the crime. Their only offense is being related to a felon. Now, for the wife of Richard Allen, she's kind of in a tough spot here. Her husband is public enemy #1 in the biggest case ever in this small community. And I think it's understandable that you would never want to believe that the love of your life is a psychotic killer. So I think in cases like this, I like to reserve my judgment on the family, because if they truly knew nothing and he's guilty, they're also, on a much lesser level, victims in some respect. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.